space, science, science. Women in science, dragonfly. Hi, I'm Josh, and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing The Glass Universe by David Sobel. How the ladies of the Harvard Observatory took the measure of the stars.
Okay, The Glass Universe is a nonfiction book detailing how a series of women who were considered calculators basically contributed to understanding the stars. So the Harvard Observatory were the first to identify the different types of stars, the different stages of stars, their temperatures, and a big part of that was about how they took the measurements at the Harvard Observatory. But in doing the measurements, they also had to interpret the data, and that's what required the help from these women who were considered the calculators. And another part of the story is sort of explaining the role of important women in this time, basically contributing to the funding, as well as being leaders in this process. You may have heard of Annie Jump Cannon, who I believe took over from the lead of the Harvard Observatory after that guy died. And I'll explain more about that going in the review, but that's the gist of what we're looking at here. If you've seen the 2014 Cosmos a Space-Time Odyssey, you may have noticed there was a call out to the calculating stars. This book is a much more in-depth analysis of those people, where they basically break down the timeline from when the Harvard Observatory first really started inviting or including women to the modern day, basically. And it's a really interesting story about the role these women played, which is a very important story.
So let's start off with some of the things that I really liked coming into this novel. First off, the cover. It's just beautiful blue. I really like it. It feels good. Open it up on the inside. You have this beautiful inner sort of stellar sky view, which looks really nice. Inside, you also have a series of illustrated or images in the center to refer to, which is a very good resource. And on top of that, at the end of this book, you have a very in-depth index prefaced by a series of elaborations or overviews of each chapter. And then before that, you have a discussion, a breakdown of every single significant figure scientists discussed in the book. And then before that, a breakdown of each yearly event, basically. Every major event that occurred, broken down by year. So if at any point you're confused about what's going on, you just use what's in the back as what to refer to help you understand what's going down. But there's a glossary in here too. So if you're in here, like say you're a casual reader, it should have everything you need to consume. I consumed it via audiobook. I didn't know the glossary and stuff was there in the back. It did prove to be very useful in the end of the book to help me recap, but it might have been useful going through to sort of refer to it. I think the ending, or all those things that I just mentioned, are really representative of what makes this book so good, in the sense that it's a very dense and well-researched recollection of how we better understood the sky, the stars, through decades of research from a number of different women, all centered around this Harvard Observatory. Sadly, as a book, though, it comes across kind of dry. And because it's very dense, hard to consume. This took me a week, like 5 days to read, and it should have taken me 2 days easily. One probably if I was really being on top of my game. But there was a problem in that I kept stopping every 30 minutes. I did my first week of binging, my first night of binging a TV show during this self-isolation. Obviously there's the stress of the coronavirus pandemic going on, but I do think it's partially this book. This book put me in a bit of a slump, and that's just because it's not a light read, and that's okay. I would say that I do want to reread this eventually, just because it's relevant to what I study. But overall, I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Not because the content isn't there. It is very good in the content, in the review of what it is that happened in the Harvard Observatory, when we're all giving credit to the women that were involved. But rather, it's because I don't see this being a really easy read. It does come across clean, especially in the audiobook, where you have a more well-known narrator, Cassandra Campbell, I think, who really does a really good job at narrating it. But because there's so much content, you really have to stay focused really intently. And I imagine it's similarly difficult just to read it as well. I looked at the reviews before I read it, saying that they felt that it was one, dense, and two, not enough focus on the women's personal lives, which I was a little upset about, because where I don't see people saying that when I read a book about Einstein or other male scientists. This should be about recapping their science and their struggle or their experiences as a woman in science. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the story of their personal life. I would say that there was a much bigger focus on the male figures at the Harvard Observatory in a way that I was kind of disappointed in. I wasn't expecting that. I was hoping it to be more focused on the women. I guess what you could say about what's going on here, or the way she tells the story, is that she basically tells a upfront and honest narration of the science that's getting done, while making a point not to overlook the role of the women in this process. And part of that means recognizing the role that men had played because of the fact that they were in a position of power. I mean, it's the patriarchy, obviously. You do see progress over the course of this book, and that's good. But because of the focus, honestly, I don't feel like we get enough focus on the women. Not just because we need more focus on the personal life, but because they seem more like side characters to basically Edward Pickering, or whatever his name was, the head of the observatory. I don't feel like I got a good picture of how they all tie together in the broad scope. So overall, I don't think the structure was that great, in the sense that how we flow from one person to the next. It seemed more like Edward Pickering's story and these tertiary characters than theirs. And it's disappointing. I mean, I was hoping for something that drew attention to them, and less so to the observatory itself. And I think part of it, again, is just because there was so much content there, that maybe that's part of the reason I didn't really connect as well as I was hoping for. But what I will say is that this isn't the driest book I've ever read. It was still interesting, and the fact is, when I was reading it in 30-minute segments, I was still enjoying it. I wasn't actively disliking it. I just found myself being inclined to stop, which isn't a good sign. Maybe ask yourself, is this something you're really interested in? Because it may take that extra level of interest to keep you pushing through it. If you are somebody who studies space, or in any type of tangential way, like I do, planetary science, I highly recommend this to you. This is a fantastic background to some key space science, to understanding the stars. I mean, it was quintessential, and I highly recommend it for that reason. It won't be the easiest read, but I've read other reads that weren't that easy. And to be honest, it's, again, not the worst science nonfiction book I've read this year. But as a whole, I was still disappointed. So I feel like a 3.5 out of 5 stars is a good, fair rating. When it comes to content, 10 out of 10. When it comes to engagement, not so much. Enjoyment, meh. I enjoyed the content, but the lack of engagement makes it hard to enjoy. And again, it tells an important story that I feel like is often overlooked, especially in the textbooks, as far as their role here, even if I wish there was a more focus on them. Part of me kind of wishes that she were to give these breakdowns of the timeline and the characters, or the people involved earlier in the book, or rather just refer to the fact that we can refer to that sooner on, which maybe she did. But I just feel like if you would have started with that and then followed the story, maybe it would have made more sense, or at the very least followed along as that was going on. Like, I'm not sure how to best describe it, just that using that in conjunction with the very dense narrative probably would have been much more beneficial. I feel like that's something for me to definitely think of when I reread it, which I would like to do eventually. We'll see if that actually happens. Again, to my planetary science and other space science friends, highly recommend this book. To others, think about it. Ask yourself if this is something you can get through, because I don't want you to put it down. I'm a little disappointed too, because this is my first Davis Sobel, and from the comments that I read, she usually is more inclusive, which isn't a good word. Usually her writing isn't as dense, apparently, or is easier for the common reader to consume. I hope so, because I've bought like 5 of her books now, and even if they don't, again, they're related to what I study. But I wanted to take this time to review this, because it's worth paying attention to, especially to my space science friends yet again. And of course, I also want to point out Dragonfly, which is a new mission being led by Dr. Xavier Turrell at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, and one of the PIs is my advisor, Dr. Catherine Naish, which I'm very happy about. Just wanted to talk about that, since space, science. Women in Science, Dragonfly. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the review. I know, not the most exciting book, but an interesting one. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day.